Hey guys, what's going on? Diptesh here, back with another interesting video. So here I have with me three phones with the most powerful processors in their generation and price segments. The Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, which is the last generation Qualcomm flagship, the 8s Gen 4, which is the current generation top mid-range chip, and the Snapdragon 8 Elite, which is the most powerful mobile chip till date. And all three devices packing 12 gigabytes of RAM. And in this video, we will compare the three to find out what kind of performance difference can one expect in the most cutting edge games and emulation. Also, if you have noticed this, I purchased a brand new OnePlus 12 in mid 2025 offline from the OnePlus Experience store for only 46,000 Indian rupees, including 6,000 rupees ICICI credit card discount, which is an amazing deal for a literal flagship. I will post a dedicated video on it. Coming back to the comparison, I'm not gonna do prolonged testing because these are different phones with different thermal characteristics, so I don't want to introduce variables in this test. I will also use a phone cooler. I'm basically trying my best to isolate the SoC performance. We are not comparing the phones here, we are only comparing the SoC and its peak performance. The OnePlus 12 here is also rooted to eliminate thermal throttling as much as possible, as the OnePlus 12, unlike the OnePlus 13 series, throttles very quickly even without getting hot at all. Also, if you are in the market for a new Android phone or tablet and you intend to use it for really high-end gaming slash emulation, these three are going to be the most common choice for you. And so, at what kind of price points can you expect to get these SoCs? So for the Snapdragon 8s Gen 4, it's going to be the Poco F7, which sells for 30,000 rupees for the base variant with 12 gigabytes of RAM. For the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, which is getting harder to find these days, you will find it in the OnePlus Pad 2 with 12 gigabytes of RAM for 32,000 rupees with card discounts, which is a really amazing deal. If you want a smartphone form factor, you can get the OnePlus 13R for 40,000 rupees with card discounts, although I have seen it as low as 36,000 rupees with card discounts. The base variant Galaxy S24 with 8 Gen 3 is also supposed to be available at 40,000 rupees in the upcoming sales, though to be honest, I cannot recommend it. Finally, for the 8 Elite, you can find it in the OnePlus Pad 3 with 12 gigabytes of RAM for as low as 43,000 rupees, and in the Realme GT7 Pro for only 45,000 rupees with current discounts, which is crazy value. Here for this comparison, we are using the OnePlus 12 representing the 8 Gen 3, the Poco F7 representing the 8s Gen 4, and the Xiaomi 15 representing the 8 Elite. So with that said, let's start the comparison. Okay, so for the first and only native game comparison, we will test Grid Legends, because this is the only game on Android that can show very clear performance scaling when using more and more powerful SoCs. It's got the highest graphical fidelity on any Android game, and more importantly, you can go into the configuration file of this game and modify each and every aspect of the graphical fidelity and rendering pipeline to ensure exactly the same testing conditions for utmost fairness. So what I've done here is I have used the graphics config and resolution for the 8s Gen 4 device and updated the configurations of the 8 Gen 3 and 8 Elite devices to exactly match the configuration of the 8s Gen 4 device and to keep the comparison absolutely fair and square. And I have also disabled dynamic resolution to keep the rendering resolution constant. And here we can see that the 8s Gen 4 and the 8 Gen 3 is actually neck and neck to each other in the upper 40 FPS range. Meanwhile, the 8 Elite is significantly ahead with over 70 FPS on average. Straight plus 25 FPS ahead, man. This shows how much more powerful and what a huge leap Qualcomm took with the 8 Elite over the 8 Gen 3. Note that the 8 Elite is using downgraded graphics configuration to match the 8s Gen 4. In reality, the 8 Elite will also be under 50 FPS range if I use the actual 8 Elite configuration. That is why the game is so great at testing SoC performance scaling. Finally, here are the results. It is a practical tie between the 8S Gen 4 and the 8 Gen 3 at around 48 FPS. There is minor resolution difference between the two due to the different aspect ratios. The 8 Elite on the other hand is 48% faster with an average FPS over 70. That's a monstrous difference in performance, and that's why it makes the Realme GT7 Pro just that much more enticing. Okay, now moving on to some Windows x86 64 game simulation, and for this we are using the latest 5.0.5 build of the Game Hub emulator, and I have installed the emulator as an Antutu app package to eliminate any and all kind of thermal throttling. So for the first game we will start with GTA 5 on the 8S Gen 4. I'm gonna show you the configuration real quick. Do note the 8S Gen 4 does not support Mesa turnip drivers. Here are the in-game graphics settings. Keeping it simple, DirectX 11 1280 by 720 normal settings. Now, the biggest disadvantage of the 8S Gen 4 is the lack of turnip drivers, and no one knows if it will ever come or not. In GTA 5, which is very CPU demanding due to the huge open world nature, the 8S Gen 4 provides the worst experience among the three SoCs that I'm testing. If you are on foot, you can expect to get 40 FPS on average, and if you are driving fast across the map, then expect to be in the mid 30 FPS range. I feel the experience is only marginally better since the last time I tested GTA 5 on the 8S Gen 4 iQOO Neo 10. If you lock the FPS to 30 FPS, you can get a smoother, more consistent experience, but the 8S Gen 4 in the current state cannot provide a 100% locked 30 FPS experience. Okay, now moving on to the 8 Gen 3. Now the biggest strength of the 8 Gen 3 over the 8S Gen 4 and the 8 Elite is the availability of turnip drivers. You will get the best compatibility and least graphical glitches with the 8 Gen 3. So we are using the same graphical settings on the 8 Gen 3, 1280 by 720p, DirectX 11, normal settings. Now here the performance is a lot better than the 8S Gen 4. When on foot, you can expect to be in the mid 50 FPS range. And when speeding across the map, you will be in the mid 40 FPS range, and that too consistent mid 40 FPS without much hitches. In less popular areas, you can also be in the low 50 FPS range. Even though the raw capabilities of the SoC is the same as the 8S Gen 4 kind of, I believe the turnip drivers make a huge difference. On the 8 Gen 3, you can absolutely expect a locked 30 FPS experience if you cap the FPS to 30 FPS. Finally, moving on to the Snapdragon 8 Elite. Now 8 Elite also doesn't support turnip drivers, so compatibility is still not as good as 8 Gen 2 or 8 Gen 3. Same graphic settings. Now here in GTA 5 you can see the advantage of the monstrous CPU performance of the 8 Elite. GTA 5 is obviously heavily CPU bound, And this is why we see this huge FPS difference due to the much faster CPU performance. The CPU bottleneck is the lowest here, and this is why the GPU utilization is also the highest among the three, and you can expect over 75 FPS on foot, which is crazy. And if you are speeding through the map, you can still maintain over 60 FPS. On the 8 Elite, you can not only get a perfectly stable 30 FPS experience if you cap it to 30 FPS, but also achieve a perfectly stable 40 FPS frame rate cap, which is my recommended way of experiencing such high-end emulation on Android. Alright, next we will test Nier Automata. Starting with 8S Gen 4. Here are the config settings. And for in-game settings, we are testing at 1280 by 720 using the medium preset, but with anti-aliasing set to SMAA. Now in Nier Automata, none of the devices can play with an uncapped frame rate. And the reason is, for example, here I will unlock the FPS, and you can see that we get plus 10 FPS to the low 40 FPS range. But we immediately hit 100% GPU usage, and I've seen this with multiple emulated PC games. The moment you hit 100% GPU usage, the game becomes very choppy, even though you are at a higher FPS. So for Nier Automata, it is recommended to cap the FPS to 30 FPS and stay under 99% GPU usage. And the 8S Gen 4 can do this pretty decently. In certain intense combat scenarios, you can sometimes hit 99% GPU usage and experience some stutters, but I have found that to be pretty rare. Next is the 8 Gen 3, we should be using turnip drivers. Same graphic settings. So on the 8 Gen 3 as well, when you unlock the FPS, you hit the same ceiling as the 8S Gen 4 at around 40-42 FPS, and the game becomes choppy. However, when you cap the FPS to 30 FPS, notice the GPU usage and compare that against the 8S Gen 4. The 8 Gen 3 Adreno 750 hovering around 75% to 85% with spikes to the upper 90s versus the 8S Gen 4 Adreno 830, which is almost always hovering at around 90% GPU usage, which means it is more close to hitting 100% GPU usage and cause stuttering during intense scenes. The 8 Gen 3 is basically providing more breathing room for a smoother experience. Finally, on the 8 Elite, if you unlock the FPS, you can get close to 60 FPS, but you will also hit that 100% GPU utilization and experience choppy gameplay. But because of the GPU headroom with the 8 Elite, instead of 30 FPS, you can cap the FPS to 40 FPS and still remain under 95% GPU utilization and get a much smoother experience than 30 FPS on the 8 Gen 3 and 8S Gen 4. Though I still recommend sticking to 30 FPS since the power usage and temperatures drop significantly at 30 FPS. Finally, let's test Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and this is easily the most challenging game in the testing roster today. We will start with the 8S Gen 4. Playing at 1280 by 720 lowest preset DirectX 11. Now we're testing this very CPU heavy scene at the beginning of the game, and the 8S Gen 4 is kind of struggling. Best case, it's doing just over 30 FPS in some areas, but mostly it's below 20 FPS with random stutters. In the cutscene, it can kind of maintain 30 FPS on average. Now the 8 Gen 3 is performing quite a bit better. You can reach as high as mid 40 FPS range. Now in the crowd, we are not hitting very high FPS or anything, but at least we are close to the quote-unquote cinematic 24 FPS range and more frequently reaching 30 FPS. And there are much less random dips in performance. Cutscene performance is also much better, consistently in the mid 30 FPS range. Now, the 8 Elite is a beast. It can do over 60 FPS at the beginning, and in the crowd, the 8 Elite is mostly in the mid 30 FPS range. Yes, there are dips, but far less compared to the 8 Gen 3. Cutscene performance is also pretty crazy. It can be in the mid 50s to over 60 FPS on average. You can cap the FPS to 30 FPS on the 8 Elite and actually get a usable practical experience with Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Alright guys, that's it for this comparison. In conclusion, the 8 Elite is clearly the most capable and support will only keep improving. It is definitely the most future-proof. The Realme GT 7 Pro and OnePlus Pad 3 can be great choices if you want to do some emulation on the side. That said, the 8 Gen 3 still retains the best compatibility for both PC and Switch emulation. And it also means you have more choices of using different x86 emulators. Finally, the 8S Gen 4 is a good chip. It basically brings 8 Gen 3 performance to the mid-range and can be had for as low as 30,000 rupees. But it's not quite ready yet for reliable emulation performance. It neither has the mature driver support as Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, nor does it have the CPU and GPU muscle of 8 Elite as of now. Of course, things will keep improving. Okay, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like, share and subscribe. Take care and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.